welcome to Katrina's Creations Wednesday episode. And today I am doing a Q&A. I put a post out on Facebook the other day saying if you have a question, throw it at me and I'll see what I can do to answer it. So today is going to be a Q&A. I have not done one of these for a while, and we have 4 different questions. So before we get started, yes, I'm wearing the same sweater again. I've been living in this thing lately. This is the Flax Light by Tin Can Knits, and it's just snuggly, and I've been wearing it a lot. Washing it, but wearing it a lot. So let's get started. I will start with some of the easier questions first, and I'll save the longest answer for the end, because I will be doing a little tutorial / demonstration with it. So the first one comes from Jocelyn Prieto, and she's, does your daughter or any of your grandchildren knit or would like to knit? Yes. My daughter does knit, but she primarily weaves. She also, well, she had a spinning wheel. Their house caught fire back in the summer, and her weaving loom was able to be saved because it was in a different room from where the fire took place, but her spinning wheel was lost, so she has not replaced it yet. But she has a Kromsky single rigid heddle loom and with a stand, and so she really enjoys that. But she also does knit as well. My daughter-in-law is learning to crochet, and both of my granddaughters, both of them loom knit, with the little frames with the pegs. They both do loom knitting. My oldest granddaughter also does needle felting. So she makes like little, you use like a kind of a sponge, and you use fleece, and you have this like a needle that has a barb on the end, and you basically felt the object that you're poking with this barbed needle with, and then it becomes whatever you're going to make it. And she makes it into like little stuffed animals and stuff, and she's made some like undersea water pictures with like octopus and all that kind of stuff on it. I think she entered that in the 4-H fair a couple years ago. So yeah, she is into the needle felting as well as the loom knitting. And one of my older grandchildren, who is one of the boys, he's the second oldest boy. When he was really little, he really struggled with attention deficit. He was very hyper. And my daughter taught him how to finger knit. And that actually acted like a fidget spinner for him. He could concentrate better if he had something to do with his hands. And then I have one of my younger grandsons stayed with us. Oh, it's been about 6 months ago, spent a couple nights with us. And he told me, he says, Grandma, I need you to teach me how to croquet. So he continues to pronounce crochet as croquet, but which was adorably cute. But so Grandma was trying to teach him how to croquet. He got to chain stitch down. That was about as far as we got. Now my mother, she sews, and she has a knitting machine, but she hasn't touched it for quite a while. But she does a lot of sewing, and she has one of those sewing machines. It's Bernina that actually embroideries, and it's been a few weeks ago that I showed you a bedspread that she gave me that's all quilted with like doilies on the top. That was all done by my mother. And my grandmother, my dad's mom, she was a big crocheter. She didn't knit, but she crocheted, and she did a little bit of sewing too, but mostly she crocheted. I remember as a child going over, and she had her crocheted doilies laid out on the carpet on her floor, and she was like putting them in sugar water, and then she would use the carpet for a blocking board, and she would pin out all of her doilies. So the next question comes from Helen Zimkowski, and it is, what is your favorite yarn to work with? Hands down, alpaca. I would love to be able to work with Kiviot or Vicuña, which are like really, really rare to get hold of, but they're over $100 an ounce. So that's not going to happen anytime soon. So the next best thing would be alpaca, and I love knitting or crocheting with that because it just feels really good in my hands. It doesn't snag. It's just I don't know, it's just very pleasant to work with. It's just not uncomfortable to use. If you have been watching the podcast, the capelet that I'm making is being made from some yarn from Knit Crate from last month. So last month? Yeah, last month. March. Yeah. And so month before last. And it's 100% alpaca, and it's lovely to deal with. And on the flip side, this wasn't part of the question, but I'll put it out there anyway. What is my least favorite yarn to work with? Raw silk. You would think raw silk would be really soft, but I had some raw silk that was almost like it felt like raggedy cotton, and it was really, really hard on my hands. Not like rough-wise on my hands, but because I was doing Tunisian crochet, and the hook would not slide easily through it. And as a result, I actually developed tendinitis because of using this one particular yarn. So I would say that raw silk is my least favorite. That's the only raw silk I've ever knit with or crocheted with. Cotton can be a little hard. Linen, it can be a little hard on your hands. It's just a stiffer yarn, and so it can take a little bit more effort to pull it through the hook or to slide it on the needles. So those are probably my least favorite to work with. Then Kim Brame asked, what was your most challenging yarn project or skill to learn, and how did you conquer it? I have my most challenging project right here. This is the Barton cardigan by Marley Bird. She does crochet and knit patterns. I love this sweater. I do wear it a lot. The pattern itself was not challenging. The cable's on here, and it is cabled all the way around. You can see it's like, here's the front panel. It does not have buttons. It has like a little hook thing that you hold it in place with. And here's the back of it. Now, it took me over a year to deal with this because I would pick it up for a while, work on it, and then put it away, and then pick it up, work on it, put it away. The reason was this was a charted pattern. It was not written out. You had to use a chart, which is fine. I can do either. But there's a different chart for each section of the sweater. So, and the different charts had a different number of rows. For instance, there was a chart for each of the front panels, and they were like 22, I think they were 22 rows to the pattern. But then there is a side gusset, which runs right along the side here. It's running, see if I can show it to you. It is running right under the arm. You can see it right here is where it starts, and it goes down. You'll see a triangular shape in here. Let me get the sleeve out of the way. You see the triangular shape? That's where the gusset is. The gusset was I think it was an 8-row repeat. Then there was another chart for the back. And the back was, I think, a 22. And then you had to go back and do the gusset on the other side. And then you had to do the chart for this side. So none of the charts had, the gusset had a different number of rows than the rest. And so I had to really think my way through it, because you might be working on the front on row 20, say row 20, but you might be on the gusset on row 6 one time, and then the next time you do a repeat, it might be a different number, and that part was very confusing. So how did I finally fix the problem? I actually hand wrote next to the longest row, the rows that had 22 rows, I would write down right beside it what gusset row I should be on. So that way I didn't have to remember when I got all the way around again, what row was I on? Because I had a row counter that I kept on the beginning of the knitting needle, so that each time I went around, I would click, the row to keep track when which of the 22 rows I was on. But I had problems trying to keep track of which gusset row I was on, because it repeated faster than the 22 rows section. So I got to the point where right beside all 22 rows, I numbered them 1 through 8 and then 1 through 8 and 1 through 8 so that I knew exactly which one I should be on when I got to that portion. So if you remember the pink sweater that I made that's all different cables, it's like 20 different types of cables that go down the front. That was the same situation because the center panel had the 20 different types of cable, but along the side of each side of the cabled section had a shorter cable repeat. And so I did the same thing. I remembered and learned my lesson from the Barton cardigan, and I went through and hand wrote what row I should be on so that it was a little easier to follow that way. So that's my answer for that one, Kim. Now we run to the last question, which is from Deb Knits, and that is a lady that I work with, actually. So her question is, when you are joining yarns in a project, how do you secure the joins seamlessly? There's a couple of different methods, so I'm going to show you all of them. So I'm going to get the camera turned around, and then I'm going to show you what to do. Okay, the first method, I'm using 2 separate color yarns so you can really see what I'm doing well. The first method would be when you get to where you're going to join yarns, you interlock them, like crisscross them like this, pull them like that, and then whether you were crocheting or knitting, you would just incorporate both of these. I mean, you're not going to like have a short section. You want it to go out a couple of inches, like about 2 to 3 inches, and you just would continue knitting or crocheting right across here and into your next section here. And so you'll be picking up 2 yarns across on this one and on this one, and your join is right here and there's no knot. So that's one option. The other option is called a magic knot. And a magic knot, you're going to take, my yarn's all wrinkly here. This was part of a sock blank, and you can see what it's still wanting to look like a sock blank. You're going to take the 1 yarn and tie it like a single knot, not a double knot, just a single knot, like this. And then you're going to take and do the same with the other yarn on the other side. So again, a single knot, not a double knot. Okay, now you can see I've got a single knot here and a single knot here. Now I'm going to pull the ends, and you can see those 2 knots are drawing right up against each other. And this is not a knot here. This is just where the yarn is just kinked because, like I said, this came off of a sock blank. So there you can see it's a small knot right there. And then you would just, this is supposed to be a knot that does not undo itself. So technically you're supposed to be able to clip these threads almost up at the knot, and it's not supposed to come undone. No pun intended there. Not supposed to come undone. Anyway, I get leery of clipping it. I've seen people do it and they say it does not undo, but if your yarn is slippery, if it's a slip yarn, I've had it undo. So, but on your regular yarn, it's not supposed to. I still would tend to just weave these ends in afterwards, but you don't end up with a huge knot, and it's not overly noticeable by the time you knit it in or crochet it, especially if you crochet it into things, you won't notice it at all. So that is another method. Now you can just tie a plain old knot. However, if you do something like that, I generally try to make it so that the knot is at the edge of, like the edge of the sweater. Like if I'm making a sweater, I would make sure it's at the edge where I can either weave it into a seam, you know, it's going to get sewn up into a seam, or by the time I weave in all the ends, it's really not going to be noticeable. So I try not to have a knot in the middle of my work. I try to make it off to the side. So the last method is called a spit join. Now we are not going to use spit because that would just be kind of gross, and who wants to make something for someone, give it to them and say, it's got my saliva and DNA all over it. Enjoy, that's just icky. So we're going to use a little bit of water. Now this method you can only do with 100% wool. You cannot do this with superwash, even though superwash merino is wool. It has to be just regular, untreated 100% wool. This is wool from Knit Picks, and I think this is their Knit Picks palette yarn. So the first thing you do is kind of open up the ply just a little bit. As you can see, I've kind of fuzzed it up. Unfortunately, this color's not showing up real great. So there, I have fuzzed up both plies. Now I'm going to lay them in my hand side by side like this. And I'm just going to add just a little teeny bit of water. So I'm going to put them in my hand here. I'm going to add a little bit of water. You're basically going to felt this together is what you're doing. That's probably enough. Now you put it between your hands and then you rub it back and forth with friction. And you want to do it until your hand feels like it's getting hot. When your hand has gotten hot from the friction, you know you've probably gotten it together pretty well. And there it is. I mean, it's not something you're going to want to pull on a whole lot, but there it is joined. So you have pretty much felted the seam. So I hope you found this helpful. If you have, please give me a thumbs up. If you have not already, please click the subscribe button down below. And if you click the notification bell, that will let you know anytime I post a video, which is Saturday and Wednesday, and lately it's been Thursdays too. And there's been a few others thrown in because I'm making videos for the library. So as I'm making videos for that, I've been posting it over on the Facebook channel, so you can check it out there as well. So that's it for today. Thanks again, and thank you for those that contributed questions for this video. Bye, everybody.